Day 3 here at PIT. I'm Chasity Melvin here with Chris Ekstrand, NBA consultant. Chris, day 3 in the books. The players have had multiple interviews. They've kind of got their nerves down. What did you see tonight? What stood out tonight?
I thought that the roles that guys play within their team were a little more clear than they were in the first game, and that's normal around here. It takes usually a game for everybody to get to know each other. Some of the guys have known each other before because they play in the same conference, but a lot of them don't. And what you're trying to see is who's going to assert themselves as the ball handler, as the passer, as the shooter, and who's going to get the ball in the post. So I think they kind of figured those things out a little bit better tonight. 2 out of the 3 games were really good. The third game, for some reason, it was like the air went out of the ball a little bit at the end. But overall, the tournament's been really good, and every day I would say, more often than not, the game has come down to one basket.
Obviously, yeah, that first overtime game. Speaking of guys getting into their roles, we got to see a little bit of Garrison Matthews tonight from Lipscomb. He finally was able to get touches and adjust to the NBA line and knock down some shots. What did you think about his performance?
Well, Garrison is a guy who can really shoot. I mean, I saw him get, was it 42 or 44 against NC State in the NIT. So, I didn't say that just for you, but that's something that we know he can do. And it was an anomaly last night. I mean, he only got 3 shots up, which isn't normal for him, no matter who he's playing with. But tonight, I knew he would bounce back, and he certainly did. I mean, the first couple threes he took, you could tell when it left his hand, it was in. And he's a guy who can actually do a little bit more than just shoot the 3. But on this team, that's a good role for him to have, and he made the most of it.
Speaking of getting touches behind the NBA three-point line, talk about to the fans and people just joining in and watching how they have an adjustment period of playing in college behind the college three-point line, and then in a couple of days they have to play in front of NBA scouts and GMs shooting behind the NBA range. And I think Kyle Allman showed that a bunch of guys had to, Chris Clemens, they had to adjust rather quickly. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, Clemens, I'll tell you, I got to see him at Campbell plenty. He's used to shooting 3 or 4 feet behind the line. So for him, maybe not as much an adjustment as some others. But I think for Kyle and some of the other shooters, it takes a little while. But as you know, as a player, it's not just a longer shot. It changes the spacing on the court. When the ball goes into the post and it gets kicked back out, the guy who's kicking the ball back out has to throw a longer pass. And then if you're throwing the ball into the post from the line, that's a longer pass too. So there's more deflections. The defenders are in a little different space too. To recover is longer. So there's a few differences. It's not just a guy shooting a shot 3 feet further out. There's a few other things that are involved in it. But I thought that there's a number of guys here who, after an adjustment period, are pretty comfortable shooting the NBA 3. And Kyle Allman is a guy I've seen over the years. He's a streaky type shooter, and he was on tonight. And that's what that's one of the reasons we invited him, is because he's an exciting player and he can shoot it long, and when he gets going, when he gets in a groove like he did tonight, he'll make a few.
Daquan Jeffries is a guy I really like a lot here. I feel like he's an NBA prospect. He has an NBA body. Tonight,
yes.
He was able to show his defensive capabilities. And what do you feel about his game moving forward?
I love Daquan. I mean, I'm really jealous of his build. That's a physique that anyone would want. I just want to order one of those up in the catalog. But no, seriously, I saw him a lot last year, his junior year, which he had been a transfer into Tulsa. And he wasn't a big part of the offense, but what I saw was when he did get an offensive opportunity, he made the most of it. But also, defensively, he's so physically strong. He's an incredible athlete, but he also has gigantic hands. The guy that he reminds me of, not in terms of his leaping ability, although he is a good leaper, but in terms of his height versus the size of his hands, is Julius Erving. For you younger people who never saw Julius Erving play, I'm sorry for you, because he's fantastic, but Julius was only maybe a half-inch taller than me. He's like 6'6.5", and he had the hands of a guy 7'2", and that's what Daquan Jeffries has. I mean, he gets a steal, he's holding the ball like it's a softball. I mean, his hand is enormous. And as a defender, if you have active hands on defense, plus your hands are that big and strong as his are, he might be able to make the NBA someday, maybe not the first year, but eventually as he develops, just based on his defense. His offense is not bad, but his defense is really something. He can control a guy without it looking like a foul because his hands are so big and so strong. if a guy has a half step on him, he says, no, wait a minute, big fella, I'm just going to hold you a little bit, and he gets back into play. So I like a lot of things about him. He didn't make as many shots today as he did in his first game, but he's a terrific prospect who has exciting abilities that can be developed in a lot of different areas of the game.
Great points, and obviously he made the key defensive stop on the out-of-bounds play.
Absolutely.
I mean, so that was great accuracy, what you explained about his athleticism, his wingspan on defense. Let's go to another subject. As you know, and coaching in the G League this year myself, there are a lot of guys who are tweeners, like we want to call them, 4s and 5s. I really like the play of Jakeenan Gant. Can you talk about his play? And he repped out for the mid-majors here. I like to call him, you gave Daquan Jeffries the poor man Julius Erving. I'll say Jakeenan Gant is a poor man's Corey Brewer. Does he have a place in the league with the athleticism and the way he played too?
I think he really does, and I think it's a great point. I think he, like Corey Brewer, could guard more than one position in the NBA. I think this guy eventually, he's still a little raw in some areas, and he hasn't had to guard people out on the floor as much in that conference with smaller players. He's mostly defending in the post. But he can definitely defend out on the floor. So he's a multi-positional defender. He's an excellent athlete. He's long, he's rangy. And I think that in this day and age, so much is how well are you able to switch. We used to say back in the old days, big, small switch, right? It's a big guy setting the pick, and it's a small guy coming off the pick. So now you have a big guarding a small. Well, the more guys there are like him, who, it doesn't matter, he can guard the big guy because he's big and strong and can leap, so he can block a shot of a big guy, but also he's got great lateral movement, quickness, so he can guard guards too. And so defensively, it's all there, it just needs to be developed. He has to learn how to run through screens as a defender and things like that, because he didn't do that much of that in college. But also offensively, I happened to see him a couple times this year. I drove out to Appalachian State, which not a lot of people do, to see him play because that's his conference. And I saw him make a couple threes, also score in the post. So, I might not be the smartest guy in the world, but you see a guy making threes and he's dunking in the post and he's blocking shots and he's rebounding, you start to think, this guy's doing a lot of things well. He's checking a lot of boxes, as they say. And like I said, he's making a bit of a transition here from being a guy who just guards a post player who's on the block to being able to chase, and go to the corners and, get a hand up on shooters. But he's making adjustments almost game to game here.
Another guy that made adjustments and another tweener that I saw tonight was Juwan from Indiana.
Yes.
Tell me about his play tonight. He actually showed that he could possibly be a stretch four by hitting the three-point ball.
I was a little disappointed the first game because I thought he relied too much on just standing at the three-point line and waiting for the ball to come to him. That's not the way he played at Indiana.
Yeah.
And that first game I thought he was just a little passive. I mean, he's a big, strong guy who can actually put it on the floor a little, and I wanted to see him show that, and instead I thought he settled. I thought he settled for some threes, and he wasn't making them either, which is another negative. But in this game, this was the Juwan Morgan that we saw, that we invited to play in the tournament, because he can do a little bit inside, he can do a little bit outside, he can defend, he can block a shot. He switched off a couple times and either blocked or changed the shot of a guard driving to the basket. And he just had more activity. He had more pep in his step tonight. I think he's got a lot of ability. I just think his first game was one of those games where a little tentative. He's feeling it out a little bit. This was more of the genuine article.
Well, we've made it through the tornado watch. There's still storming outside, but there's going to be a storm in the championship game tomorrow. Who do you expect to come out and show up and show out in the championship game?
Well, I think the funny thing about a tournament like this is the players know that it's really how they perform within the team concept, but also, they want to stand out individually for the NBA teams. But they're all competitors. And it doesn't matter if it's a 4-day tournament or whatever. If you have a chance to win a championship, who doesn't want to win that? I mean, we're all competitive, right? You're an ex-player. You want to win. And when you're coaching now, of course you want to win. So even though there's a trophy and there's T-shirts and hats, what have you, any athlete, once you get a chance to get in that championship game, guys are going to play their hardest.
Yeah.
Whether they play their best, you don't know, but they're going to play their hardest. And it's great to have a format like this where you have a quote, championship game, because it gives guys who are a little banged up, their legs are going to be a little tired, it gives you that extra incentive, it gives you that extra juice to play in a championship game, because there is something riding on it. And who doesn't want to walk out of here and say, we won it, we won the thing, So I think you'll see that.
And it'll be great for the NBA scouts and the GMs here, because in a way, for these guys, the championship game is the money time. And if they can step in the big game, it also adds to their resume. This was a big game after 4 days. I still had my legs. I was still able to knock down shots, right?
Absolutely. And I think the thing that, we don't think about as much, but the players do, is that there are a few guys here who are on teams that either went far in the NCAA or the NIT. We have some of those guys. But we also have some guys who were, a big fish in a small pond. They were the big man on their team, but maybe their team wasn't even that good. Some of these guys were player of the year in their conference, and their team was still only sort of 500, a mediocre team. So for those guys, I know a guy like Justin James from Wyoming, his team had a terrible year. And he was a great player in his conference, but they were just bad. They didn't have anybody to play with him. Yeah. So if you have a situation like that, guys even want to, double the effort to try to win something. So you take something away from the season and say, maybe I wasn't a champion during the college season, but I came to the PIT and I was.
Well, clear skies hopefully tomorrow. And although we're
we get a
inside,
weather report
we can hear the
here.
thunder. But hopefully the guys bring the thunder. They bring the heat tomorrow. We look forward to it, and we look forward to your expert analysis again tomorrow. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chasity.